Welcome back to my channel. I'm Darina, a provisional psychologist and practicing therapist in Australia. And I couldn't ignore this press conference between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, especially because I was born in Ukraine. And even though I moved to Australia 11 years ago, everything happening there is still very close to my heart. So in this video, I'll break down some of Trump's most blatant manipulations and show you how these exact same techniques are used in toxic romantic relationships. If you've ever been in a controlling relationship, I think you'll recognize these patterns immediately, because manipulation tactics are universal. It doesn't matter if it's a political leader negotiating international conflicts or a narcissistic partner. The playbook is the same. So let's dive in. Zelensky is making a logical argument that for many years Russia has been occupying Ukrainian territory, breaking ceasefires, which cost many civilians their lives, despite multiple diplomatic agreements. Instead of addressing these facts, Trump completely shifts the conversation to whether Zelensky has expressed enough appreciation. Trump repeatedly demands that Zelensky express gratitude, implying that Ukraine does not deserve continued support unless they acknowledges the US and Trump personally as a savior. Here's what Trump said. Have you said thank you at least once during this entire meeting? You're not acting at all thankful, and that's not a nice thing. How this mirrors toxic patterns in romantic relationship. In toxic dynamics, one partner often guilt trips the other partner for the help they provide, even when the help is conditional or used as a leverage. Anyone who has been in a toxic relationship understands how exhausting it is to argue with someone who constantly jumps from one unrelated topic to another. A more rational partner might try to stick to the facts, but the toxic partner derails the discussion with accusations like, "Have you ever even said thank you for everything I've done for you?" shifting the focus from their own harmful behavior to making the victim feel guilty. This tactic isn't just frustrating, it's designed to disorient, control, and wear down the victim, making it nearly impossible to have a productive conversation. Another manipulation Trump used is threats and conditional support. Trump implies that US support is conditional on Zelensky compliance, subtly threatening that if Ukraine does not follow his lead, the consequences will be dire. Here's what he said. "You're either going to make a deal or we are out. And if we are out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty." Or another one. "You don't have the cards." Toxic partners often use financial, emotional, or physical support as leverage to control their partner. They might say, "If you don't do what I want, I'll leave and you'll have nothing," or "No one else will ever help you but me." This keeps victim trapped in fear. Another tactic is public shaming and humiliation. Trump repeatedly dismisses and publicly criticizes Zelensky in front of the audience, undermining his credibility and confidence. Here's what he said. "I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media." Or another one. "We know that you are wrong, but I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on." Public humiliation is a common toxic tactic, where the manipulator or narcissist degrades the victim in front of others to assert a dominance and control. A toxic partner might say, "You sound so stupid right now," or "See, everyone thinks you are wrong," even though there is no direct evidence of this. It's all made to strip the victim of their confidence. Another one is shifting the focus to himself and undermining the other side. Zelensky is making a strategic argument that Russia's invasion is a direct threat to Ukraine, and if unchecked, it will escalate to threaten Europe and even American interests. Instead of directly engaging with this reality, Trump redirects the conversation to his own perceived greatness. He repeatedly dismisses the substance of the discussion, but making it about his personal success, his past deals, and how previous US leaders were incompetent compared to him. By doing this, he avoids directly addressing the moral or strategic reasons for aiding Ukraine, and instead implies that the conflicts exist because his leadership was absent. For example, Zelensky said, "If we will not stop Russia, they will go further into the Baltics and Poland. Your soldiers will have to fight." And Trump responds, "The United States should not have allowed this to happen. I've stopped wars before they ever started." So instead of acknowledging Ukraine's position or the risk of Russian expansion, Trump shifts blame to past US leadership and then makes himself the hero of the story. The conversation ceases to be about the real problem and becomes about proving his personal superiority. Another manipulation is shutting down tough questions with deflection and attacks. One of the most noticeable tactics Trump uses in his press conference is deflection and personal attacks when faced with tough questions. So instead of directly addressing whether he would tell Putin to withdraw from occupied Ukrainian territories, he dodges the question, gives a vague response, and then attacks the journalist who asked it. So journalist said, "Would you direct President Putin to withdraw his forces from occupied Ukrainian territories?" And Trump says, "We'll take a look at it. It's a big area. CNN should focus on surviving instead of asking ridiculous questions." So rather than providing a clear answer, Trump shifts the focus entirely. Instead of engaging with the substance of the question, he deflects by saying it's a big area, a vague, meaningless response that avoids commitment. Then he reframes the question as unimportant or uninformed, making the journalist seem out of line. And then he attacks the source instead of answering, undermining CNN, rather than addressing the actual issue. So how this mirrors manipulation in unhealthy relationship. This tactic is often used to control conversations, avoid responsibility, and make the other person feel insecure about asking questions. The goal is to shift the focus away from the issue and put the person in the position of being defensive. So here's the example how this plays out in real life. Say one partner says, "You said you'd stop messaging your ex, but I saw text from them on your phone." And they reply, "Why are you even looking at my phone? You're acting paranoid." So instead of addressing the actual concern, the conversation is turned against the person asking the question. The original issue, betrayal of trust, is now buried under accusations and blame shifting. Here's scenario number 2, shifting focus to something unrelated. Say one partner says, "You've been drinking again, even though you promised to stop." And they will reply, "Oh, so now you are perfect. What about last week when you snapped at me?" So you see, instead of discussing the real issue, the conversation spirals into an unrelated argument, forcing the person raising the concern to defend themselves rather than holding the other one accountable. And here is scenario number 3, attacking instead of answering. You can say, "Why did you lie about where you were last night?" And they'll reply, "I don't have to explain myself to someone who's always trying to start a fight. No wonder no one else puts up with you." You see, this shifts the conversation from dishonesty to personal insults, making the one asking the question feel insecure or guilty instead of standing their ground. Why this tactic works in both politics and relationships? This kind of deflection and attack serves a few key purposes. Avoiding accountability. The person in power never has to answer the actual question. Creating confusion, burying the real issue under unrelated arguments. Discrediting the person asking the question, making them seem unreasonable, aggressive, or paranoid. Exerting control, teaching the person questioning that challenging authority will result in punishment, discouraging them from speaking up again. Another tactic Trump uses in his press conference is framing compromise as the only option, even when there is a clear power imbalance. Zelensky asserts that Ukraine cannot compromise with Putin given his repeated violations of ceasefires and the ongoing attacks on Ukrainian civilians. Instead of acknowledging this reality, Trump pressures Ukraine into making a deal anyway, suggesting that both sides need to come together as if they're equally responsible for the conflict. So Trump says, you can't do any deals without a compromise. Or, I'm here as a mediator between two parties that have been very hostile. This framing ignores the fundamental reality of the situation. Ukraine is the victim of aggression and Russia is the aggressor. However, by positioning himself as a neutral mediator, Trump equates the two sides, making it seem as though Ukraine refusing to negotiate is the real obstacle to peace. How this mirrors manipulation in controlling relationships. In unhealthy dynamics, romantic relationship, a third party, such as a friend, family member, or enabler, may try to pressure someone into making unfair compromises, often for the benefit of the person causing harm. Here is the scenario. The victim might say, I won't go back to my ex. They lied, manipulated me, and made my life miserable. A friend or family member can respond, you need to meet them halfway. You are both at fault. Maybe if you weren't so stubborn, things wouldn't have gotten this bad. Can you see the problem? This completely ignores the power imbalance and shifts responsibility onto the person who has already been hurt. Just like in Ukraine's case, where Russia is the one that initiated the aggression, a toxic partner is the one who caused harm, yet the pressure to compromise is placed on the person who was wronged. This tactic is designed to wear down the individual into compliance by making them feel as though their refusal to engage is the problem rather than the behavior of the person who caused harm in the first place. Another one is using personal attacks to undermine authority. At the end of the exchange, a journalist completely shifts the focus away from Ukraine's survival and instead attacks Zelensky's appearance, suggesting that by not wearing a suit, he is disrespecting his position. Here's what he said. Why don't you wear a suit? You are the highest office in your country, and a lot of Americans think it's disrespectful. Have they done a poll or something? And Zelensky answered, as he usually does, that he will wear a suit after the war is finished. And rather than discussing Ukraine's urgent security needs, the journalist trivializes Zelensky's leadership by reducing the conversation to his clothing. This is a classic belittling tactic used to make someone seem unprofessional or unserious or unworthy of respect, even when their actions prove otherwise. Here's the example from a toxic relationship. So imagine you are saying, I'm exhausted, I need help, and they can reply, well, maybe if you put in more effort and looked more presentable, people would take you seriously. So you see, instead of acknowledging that the other person is saying, the conversations derailed into judgment about their appearance. This isn't just dismissive, it's meant to make the other person feel small and unworthy, so that they stop advocating for themselves. I think that's all I wanted to say today. Please, please, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in next videos on psychology of relationship and mental health, and maybe politics, sometimes, of course, through the lens of psychology.